Hi, for today we're going to start a little mini unit on graphing. We just finished up our 4 methods for solving quadratic functions. Remember, we had factoring was an option, square root method, completing the square, and also the quadratic formula. So we're going to try to take a look at how all of our answers that we found from solving, how that relates to a graph. So our next chapter, chapter 5, it's imperative that you are very comfortable in looking at the graphs of functions and how it relates to their answers and how they kind of work together. So we're going to take a couple days, just do a little mini unit right here on all of this, and hopefully that'll help clear up for next week when we start really looking at chapter 5. But for today, we're going to look at the graphs of some functions and some important pieces to them. When I come back on Friday, we'll actually look a little bit more at the graphs and more things by hand and kind of putting it all together once I'm here for that. But we're going to also look at calculating the vertex today as well. So otherwise, we're going to kind of look at some little nitty-gritty, some vocab, and how all of this kind of works together. All right, so preparing the graph, first thing, standard form. So hopefully remember your standard form. Standard form of the function is y equals ax squared plus bx plus c. Notice we have the y equals on this one. Since we're going to start talking about the graphs, instead of setting them actually to 0 like we normally do when we're solving, we're actually going to be looking at them as y equals because everything you graph always starts out y equals and then your equation. All right, a blank is the graph of a quadratic function. Does anyone know what it's called, that graph that it makes when you actually graph something that's x squared? That graph's called a parabola. Hopefully that's a word that you've seen at some point. But we're talking about a parabola. So anytime you hear or see that shape, anything quadratic, parabola. The path of any object flying through the air can be described as blank. Usually when you're thinking about parabolas, graphing quadratics, the first thing that comes to my mind is Angry Birds. I'm sure you guys have played Angry Birds a time or two. But Angry Birds, the shape and the path that this is taking when you throw these Angry Birds through the air and they're launched, you can kind of look at the path that they're taking here. The shape that's being made as they kind of fall off into the house, the shape that they make there is a parabola. Okay, it is a U-shaped. This is like an upside down U. If you would graph something another way, it also could look like the U shape going upwards. It would be this way. But that's not very Angry Bird-like. But anything that you can throw through the air, pick up a baseball, toss that through the air, pick up a football, throw it through the air. The path that it's taking as you throw it, launch it in the air, and it comes back down to the ground, that's going to be a parabola. Pick up your baby brother, throw him through the air, same thing. Anything that you pick up, anything that you throw, is going to make that parabolic shape. All right, so let's go ahead and just get a little practice. I know we've done this before a lot with quadratic formula. Just to make sure we're good here, we're going to put the equation in standard form and then name A, B, and C values. Okay? So first thing, we always want them to be standard form. So if you look right here, we have them in the wrong order. So we need to rewrite that so our squared term is going to be first. Then we have our x term, our b value, and then the c value is negative 11. Notice I didn't change the signs of anything, just whatever sign was in front of it stayed with it. I didn't move anything across the equal sign. I'm just rearranging them, putting them in a different order. So then I can label my a value, so always the number with x squared, so my a equals 2. My b value is the number in front of x, so that's going to be a 1. And my c value is the number at the end, which is negative 11. Okay, take a look at the next example. Again, they're going just in the wrong order, so the x squared should be first. Please note that the negative sign stays with that, and then we have a positive 6x. Again, I didn't move anything over the equal sign, so the signs of them didn't actually change. A value, number in front of the x squared, which is negative 7. My b value is the number in front of the x, which is 6. C value is the number at the end, which in this case I don't have one, so it would be a 0. Right, and one last example. Notice it's already in the right order. All I have is an x squared term. Okay, so I don't have to move anything. Also note the notation here. I don't have a y equals, but I have f of x equals. This is just known as function notation. I like to think of it as a name. I kind of always refer to him as Frank. F for Frank. It's just a way to name your equations. And as we get into more things later on, we'll kind of see how that's a little more important. And it's just a way to name them. So don't get hung up if you see that. The f of x, the f is not a variable. It's not another x that you have to move. It's just a name. That's Frank's equation. You could replace it. If you're uncomfortable, you could replace it with a y equals. It means the same thing. Okay, there's no difference between the two of those. All right, so my a value, the number in front of x squared, which is 2/3. B is the number in front of x, which I don't have one, so it's a 0. C, the number at the end, again, I don't have one, so it's going to be a 0. Okay, so standard form, your ax squared, then your bx, then your c. Whether you have a y or an f of x out in front, it doesn't really make a difference. It's just a way to name your equation. Okay, so what does standard form, why is it so important? What's it tell us about the parabola? Why do I always make you put everything in standard form? Well, a couple different things come from this. First thing that we're going to talk about, a little bit of vocab for you, is the point where the parabola changes directions is called what? So you think about a parabola, you're throwing the ball, so the ball takes off in the air, it goes up, and it's going to hit a point where it's going to stop going up, and it's going to start going down. So what is that point called when it stops going up, it starts going down? That point is called the vertex. Okay, very important. Just looking at an equation in standard form, I actually don't know what the vertex is just by looking at it. But coming up here in just a little bit, I want to show you how we can find it from standard form. But what is important from standard form, the big thing is your a value. That a value sitting there, if a is positive, your parabola is going to open up. So if you look down here at this bottom one, so on this one, your a value is a +1. And the graph is opening upwards, meaning it is pointing up. So if we talk about where the vertex is located, the vertex is where this one starts going down, and then it stops going down, and then it starts coming up again. So that point right there, where it changes direction, that's going to be its minimum value. And it makes sense. If you look at that, is the vertex the highest point on the graph or the lowest point? In this case, that's the lowest point, which makes it a minimum. All right, and then kind of the opposite of that, if your a value is negative, what's that mean? That means your graph is going to open downwards. More of that Angry Bird look to it, or throwing something through the air. So if that's the case, it's going to open downwards. And again, where's that point where it changes direction? It's going up, 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 stops, and then it's going to go back down again. What is that point called? That's your vertex. And in this case, it is the maximum point or value, because it's the highest point on your graph, not the lowest. All right, so just get a little practice. Decide whether the parabola will open up or down, and whether it will have a maximum or a minimum point. Okay, I don't have to do any calculations for this. I just need to look at my a value. All right, so number 4, y equals 2x squared minus 3x minus 5. Looking at that, I know that my a value is a +2, because that's the number in front of my x squared. So since it is positive, then I know my graph is going to open upwards. It's going to look like that. So it's going to open up. Always think of positive. Positive people are always looking up, they're looking forward, everything's great. So positive a value, it's opening upwards, it's pointing up towards the positive numbers. And then will it have a maximum or minimum value? Well, look at that point. Is that the highest or the lowest point? That is the lowest, so it's the minimum value. To me, it's easier just to kind of draw a little sketch, and it's easy to see whether it's a maximum or a minimum value for that vertex. All right, number 5. For this one, notice it's in the wrong order. So we can get a little more practice rewriting in standard form. The 2x squared should be first, then the 13x, and then the -7. So again, my a value is a +2, so it's going to open upwards because it's positive. And then the vertex will be the lowest point or the minimum. And then example number 6, again, it's not in the right order. So it would be -6x squared plus x. So I'm missing my c value. But in this case, I'm just looking at the a. My a value is a -6. Since it's negative, I know it will open down, pointing pointing down towards those negative numbers. And in this case, when I look at my sketch, the vertex is actually the highest point, so it's the maximum point of my graph. So just by looking at the equation, I should have a rough idea, at least kind of if it's going to open up or if it's going to open down. I may not know how wide the graph is or how narrow it is just yet, and we'll talk about that eventually, but I should at least be able to tell you if it's opening up or if it's opening down. All right, so I mentioned the vertex. Looking at the equation, I don't know what it is. However, we can calculate what it is. Okay, so if you don't have a calculator app, make sure you grab a calculator real quick. This is where your calculator is kind of your best friend because you're going to be plugging a lot of numbers in here, and it's going to make things a lot easier. So your vertex, that's an ordered pair. It's going to be an X and then a Y, right? Because it's some point located on that XY coordinate grid. So if I'm looking for my X coordinates, the first thing we need to do is we have to memorize this little formula. Okay, for the X coordinate, it's negative B over 2 times A. So that negative, just kind of like in the quadratic formula, you had negative b and always change it to its opposite. Same thing's going to happen here. And we're going to divide that by 2 times whatever the a value is. Okay, so then once we have that number, in order to find the y part of the vertex, right, because this is finding the x, in order to find the y coordinate right here, you have to plug the x value back into the equation to see what you get. All right, so let's take a look how all this works together. So on the example, y equals 2x squared plus 8x plus 5. So first thing, let's go ahead and look at this formula right here. So x equals negative, my b value is 8, divided by 2 times my a value, which is 2. So I'm just plugged in so far. I plugged in my b, and I plugged in that a. And we're going to clean it up. Now be careful typing that in the calculator. A lot of students have a tendency to type in negative 8 divided by 2 times 2, and like you type it in as one big thing, and the calculator does order of operations, which you don't want it to do in this case. So I always tell students clean up the top, so that's going to give me negative 8. Clean up the bottom, 2 times 2, which is 4, and then clean up the fraction that you have left. So negative 8 divided by 4 is negative 2. All right, so if I'm looking at my vertex then, I want an ordered pair. That is my x value, is negative 2. All right, and then to find the y value, we're going to take that and we're going to plug it back in. So I'm coming back up to here, to that equation, and we're going to plug it in. So it says 2 times x squared. Well, I found my x value is negative 2 squared plus 8 times x, plug it in again, and then plus 5. Okay, so again, I'm coming way back up here to the top, this original problem, and I'm plugging in my x's that I found. Okay, this is the point where your calculator is your best friend, and you're literally just going to type this in. So grab your calculator for me. We're going to type in what we just wrote down, and we're going to see what we get for an answer. All right, and we should get negative 3. Which tells us our vertex is located at negative 2, negative 3. So when I come back on Friday, we're going to look at actually doing some graphing by hand. No groaning. We're going to do a little bit by hand, and then we're going to move in next week looking at the graphing calculators as well. But it's really important that you understand kind of where these numbers are coming from, and the calculator is not just this magical, mystical thing that does stuff for you. Okay, it's actually not too bad to graph by hand. All right, but we always start with that vertex, which in this case is at negative 2, negative 3. All right, let's practice a little bit more. All right, so number 7, find the vertex. So you need to come back to that formula again. My x value is located at negative b over 2a. So that right there we need to have memorized. So let's go ahead and find that. So negative b over 2a. Negative, my b value is 4. Over 2 times my a value, which is 2. Clean up the top, negative 4. Clean up the bottom, which is 4. Then clean up the fraction, which is negative 1. All right, so that's my x value. So in my vertex, I get negative 1, not sure. Okay, so we need to find that y value. So we're going to take our value that we found, we're going to plug it back in. So we get 2, my x is -1 squared plus 4 times -1 minus 7. All right, we're doing right back up to this equation. We plugged it in. Calculator's your best friend. So we're going to type that directly into the calculator, and we're going to see what we get. We should get -9. So as we get into graphing by hand on Friday, you're going to be able to find your vertex. So it's at -1, -9. You'll be able to plot that point and know exactly where it's located. All right, number 8. Same idea. We have to start with -b over 2a. So negative, my b value is -6 over 2. My a value, in this case, is a 1. Again, clean up the top. Negative -6 is +6. Clean up the bottom, gives me a 2. And 6 divided by 2 is 3. So my vertex is located at 3 something. Okay, so again, we're going to go back to the original problem way up here at the top. And we're going to plug that in for x. So we'll have 3 squared minus 6 times 3 plus 5. So again, grab your calculator, and we'll go ahead and type that in. And we should get -4. So my vertex is located at 3, -4. All right, at this point, you've seen a couple examples. At this point, hit pause on this video, and I would like you to try 9 and 10 on your own, and then come back and hit play again. You know, give it a try. Don't just listen to me the whole time. Hit pause, try 9 and 10. When you're done with 9 and 10, hit play, and then watch those back as I'm going to go through them for you, okay? So hit pause. Okay, now that you have attempted these on your own, like I asked you to, let's go ahead and go through them and see how you did. Okay, so we have -b over 2 times a. So negative, my b value, notice there's no plain x, so it's going to be 0 over 2 times my a value. We clean up the top, clean up the bottom. 0 divided by 6 is 0. All right, so again, my vertex then is located at 0 something. So to figure that out, we go back to the original problem. 3 times 0 squared minus 4, and that will give you -4. So my vertex is located at 0, -4. All right, number 10. Notice it's in the wrong order, so it should have been written as -x squared minus 3x plus 1. So we have to do our -b over 2a. So negative, my b value is -3, divided by 2 times a, which is -1. Clean up the top, clean up the bottom, and then clean up your fraction. And really there's not much more I can do with this other than a lot of you, I think, are more comfortable seeing that negative on the top as opposed to the bottom. These two things, they mean the same thing. I don't care if you believe the negative on top or bottom, doesn't really matter to me. They mean the same. All right, so I know my vertex is located at -3 over 2 something. Okay, so go back to the original equation. I'm going to go back to the form where I have it written in this order. But we have a negative, and then my x squared, -3 over 2 squared. Be very, very careful. If you do not put that -3 over 2 in parentheses, it's going to give you a wrong answer. Remember quadratic formula? We always talk about anytime you plug a number in, put it in parentheses. All right, so that's my negative, oh, you know what? Yeah, sorry. I just had a brain fart there for a minute. All right, -3 times my x value again, which is -3 over 2, and then plus 1. So again, definitely go turn to the calculator, and we're going to type that in. So we have a negative on the outside of that first parenthesis, don't forget that, and then -3 divided by 2, close parenthesis, squared, minus 3 parenthesis, negative 3 divided by 2, close parenthesis, plus 1. And it's going to give you 3.25 if you're using a graphing calculator. If you used a regular one, it's probably going to give you that fraction. But remember, we can always switch that to a fraction by hitting the math button. And it gives us 13 over 4. So that is where my vertex would be located. All right, so hopefully we did okay. Big idea, though, make sure we're remembering to find the x value. It's negative b over 2a. All right, that's it for today's lesson. Next thing, the sub will be handing out to you, if they've not already done so, is your worksheet for your homework for tonight. Hopefully we can finish that in class and not have to worry about it. But when I come back Friday, we'll be going over this homework, and we're going to start learning how to graph by hand. All right, so good luck, take your time on the homework, and I will see you Friday.